Uh-oh. He's wearing a tie, which it turns out looks much better with this sweater when I stand up. My parole officer won't care. I always make the parole officer joke when I'm wearing a tie. I don't know why. Perhaps so. Let's see who's in the house. John's here doing his roll call thing. There's Matthew, there's Brian, Hank, Bill, Roger, Chuck, Eugene, Frank, Webb, Gary, Brian, not to be confused with Brian, Andrew, and Donna. On your mark. Let's start. See that? We're gonna have to wait a minute now. I wish I had started 2 minutes late because I can't compete with that. I know, a tie. It's okay though. It's a monorail tie because we're talking about transportation today. What grade of social studies do you teach? You know, I almost gave you the finger in a very friendly way. Let me say really quickly what we're talking about. Hello, Dow. Let me say really quickly what we're talking about because I think the title of this before we got started was "Let's Do a Thing." I could not decide whether I was going to talk about the latest Apple Car talk or the latest Apple TV talk. I think I'm gonna do both. So there we go. Frank's wearing his best shirt. That will represent a history. He's a history teacher actually, so he's a little upset. You know what I wish I had? Patches on the elbows. Yeah, I don't. This isn't really that kind of jacket though. I did have a tweed jacket that could have had patches on the elbows, but it didn't. And we think of patches on the elbows as being like a ooh hoity-toity, right? You know, the original reason for patches on the elbows was you'd worn through your elbows, so they're not great. They're picking up the recycling. They're doing good work for the planet. And a giant truck that spews tons of fossil fuel emissions, but whatever. We're almost there. I'm seriously, I'm vamping. So yeah, did I say this is a monorail tie? I meant to say it's a monorail tie. Oh, I love a smoking jacket. Right? Yeah, that'd be neat. Because of course, you know, cigarettes weren't packed the way they used to be, so you get ash all over the thing. That's why you wear a smoking jacket, right? Because you didn't want to burn your nice shirt. That's my guess, anyway. How many rails does a tie need? Well, one. It's a monorail tie. Aren't you listening, Eugene? All right. I think they're done. Yeah, they're gone. So why don't we do a thing? Let's talk cars and TV. It is Wednesday, the 24th of February, 2021, and this is macOS Ken Live. Hi, everybody. It's Ken Ray. Thanks a lot for being here for this thing that we do every day, Monday through Friday, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern, other times, other places. It is called macOS Ken Live, an offshoot of macOS Ken, which is a show dedicated to Apple news and news related to Apple news that has been going now for 15 years. It's there every morning, Monday through Friday. This is here most afternoons, Monday through Friday. And I think you begin to get the idea of how this goes. Second part of the show, we're going to talk about television. We're going to talk about Apple TV. There's not really news there. It was just, you know, some guy who seems to know a lot about Apple, who every now and then says something about Apple that you're like, does he really know a lot about Apple though? Second half of the, well, not half. Second part of this thing, we'll talk about Wedbush analyst Daniel Ives and what he sees as Apple's biggest mistake over the past decade. Before we get to that, though, here's the thing. We know nothing about what Apple is going to do. And well, that's not true. I was going to say we don't know what Apple's going to do in television, but we have some ideas, but that's for later. We have no idea what Apple is going to do as far as the car is concerned, as far as an Apple car is concerned. And so when interesting things come up, it is so much fun to talk about them because even though, automotive is not a thing that I know anything about personally, I'm just super excited to talk about some of the possibilities that come up. It was announced today that Fisker has agreed to team up with Foxconn to develop what they call a breakthrough electric vehicle. What's it going to break through? Sounds more like something Elon Musk would build, but okay. I don't think they really mean, breaking through things. I think it's going to be breakthrough. And there's a lot about it that could be breakthrough. For example, they haven't made one of these yet, and yet they think starting in 2023, they'll be able to start producing. That can't be right. They'll be on their way to making 250,000 cars a year, is what they say. They say the team up with Foxconn is going to make it much easier for them to go from drawing board to coming off the line in a couple of years. I assume because of Foxconn's ability to manufacture it at huge volumes. Now, let's back up a tiny bit. Do you know Henrik Fisker? Not Fisker, Henrik Fisker. I used to work with Laura Burstein over at Inside Mac. She went from being a tech journalist to being an automotive journalist. She was very into the whole Fisker story back in 2005. That was 4 companies ago, I believe. Not to knock the guy. What he's trying to do is maybe not Tucker level innovation, but trying to start a car company is a difficult proposition anytime, I think. I mean, witness the fact that we all know Tesla's name. What can you tell me about, is it Nikola? Is that the other electric car maker? There are so many car makers out there that we don't know about, or so many that we just like kind of hear about and then they go away, never to be heard from again. Henrik Fisker is a Danish automotive designer and entrepreneur. He's based in LA. Best known, it says, and this is interesting because I didn't know this, although it's not surprising, which is the company that he was leading in 2005. That got sold to somebody else, and then he went on to found Fisker Automotive, which got merged into something else, I believe, and he's currently the founder and chairman and CEO of Fisker Inc. His cars are gorgeous, and he knows car design, and he's going with Foxconn. Now, I don't know where else he would go. There are other auto manufacturers out there. There's one that people name here all the time. I can't remember it. Not Tata. That's actually a motor company of its own. Magna. Magna, I guess, is a place that he could go, but he's going with Foxconn. They're working together. There was a report a month or two ago that Foxconn was ramping up its car production ability. And at the time, I wondered whether Apple would want to be Foxconn's guinea pig, right? But they don't have to be. Fisker is going to be Foxconn's guinea pig. And it's not going to be the Foxconn car by Fisker. It's not going to be the Fisker car by Foxconn. Just like the Mac that you're working on, or the iPad you're working on, or the iPhone that you're putting to your, well, not to your face, because who does that anymore? But just like the iPhone that you hold in your hand, it's not the, iPhone by Foxconn. It's not the iPad by Foxconn. It's iPad. And whatever Fisker makes with Foxconn is going to be a Fisker car, which suddenly makes Foxconn seem like a sensible choice for Apple. Now, what's interesting is Bernstein research analyst Tony Sacconaghi and another guy from Bernstein, whose name escapes me right now, Arndt Ellinghorst. I'm not making that up. I might be mispronouncing it, but I'm not making it up. They got together earlier today and released a note saying that the perfect partner for Apple on the car would be BMW. Now, I do believe that this was before the Fisker thing came out. That is worth noting. It's also worth noting that Tony Sacconaghi has no imagination where Apple is concerned, or he lacks imagination anyway. I don't think Sacconaghi can see how Apple could do it. And, granted, this is a big thing. This is a different thing than anything that Apple has done before, assuming this is a thing that Apple is actually doing. But Tony Sacconaghi can't see how, Apple is going to make money in services well into the amount of time that Apple is making a serious amount of money in services. If he doesn't know exactly how somebody is going to get to the places they're going to get to, at least as far as Apple's concerned, he has no faith and he lacks imagination. It's his job. I don't blame him. Okay, sometimes I blame him, but he apparently can't see Apple doing this on its own. And so he's looking around saying, well, who's going to be a good partner for Apple? And he and his think that BMW would be great. This was picked up by Bloomberg in a note. Sakanagi said, Sakanagi and Ellinghorst, in our view, BMW would be the ideal partner for Apple. Both companies have a leading innovation claim, superior brand equity and design, and are excellent in global manufacturing and value chain management. And value chain management, too, if you want to pronounce it properly. Bloomberg then points to a meeting and some tours and some, I wouldn't go so far as to say intellectual property exchanges, but some exchanges of ideas between Apple and BMW 5 years ago or more, kind of lending credence, although they will come back around to, on the other hand, maybe not. The question I would have to ask is, are you not going to run into the same problem? Is BMW not going to run into the same problem with Apple that Apple ran into with Nissan and with Hyundai? Is this a BMW car made by, not a BMW car made by Apple? Is it an Apple edition of a BMW? Is it an Apple car made by BMW? Is BMW seriously just going to be a contract manufacturer at that point? That seems unlikely. And Bernstein gets that. Traditional car makers will be very careful about exploring a manufacturing partnership with Apple, Bernstein said in its note. Any manufacturer does not want to end up becoming a mere enabler for one of the world's largest and best financially equipped tech players. You know who's had no problem enabling Apple? Foxconn. The other question you kind of have to wonder if you do the BMW thing is, what about price? I don't think an Apple car is going to be cheap by any stretch of the imagination, but Apple does from time to time, they lower the price on stuff, right? We've got the Apple Watch SE at this point. We had the iPhone 5C. We have the iPhone SE now. We have all kinds of things that Apple may, it's not bargain basement, but they do lower the price. Can you imagine BMW producing a car that would ever be considered anything like value? Assuming this is a thing that they actually sell, which there's no reason to assume that this would actually be a thing that they would sell. I mean, we could still be looking at this as a service, right? Which is just a fascinating idea and a fascinating thing to think about. Now, Piper Sandler analyst Harsh Kumar I can't remember if he was the one who said go big or go home earlier, but he's basically repeated that. He says that there's the possibility of an Apple car light, but he doesn't see Apple doing a light car. If Apple's going to get into a car, it's going to be an Apple car. It's not going to be a BMW version of an Apple car or an Apple version of a BMW. It's going to be, Apple going straight in at the deep end. We do not see an Apple car being a meaningful contributor in the early years, he says, but over the long term, we feel it can provide the next leg of growth for its hardware business. However, the biggest hurdle to success is the ability to manufacture vehicles in volume. Well, what we heard about what Apple was theoretically, and of course, it ended up not being true, but we had heard the possibility of Apple going with Hyundai down at that Kia plant in Georgia. They were talking about producing 100 cars a year with the hopes of eventually ramping up to 400. Did I say 100? Sorry, 100,000 cars a year, with the hope of eventually ramping up to 400,000. If the market bore it or could bear it. If Foxconn and Fisker can do 250,000 cars in a year, they're more than halfway to what Apple was, rumored to be hoping for at some point. Now, I mean, that's tough to talk about exactly because that was rumor from rumor on a deal that ended up not happening. Still an interesting idea. I think it's a lot of fun to think about. But we're done thinking about that for now. We're going to think about television in just a moment. First, I do want to let you know about another show coming up tomorrow, actually. I had teased after the show because for people listening to the podcast, when the show's over, we hang out in the chat room and we talk about other stuff. Today, we might be talking about how stuttery the video got because it was stuttering on my end. I assume it was for everybody else, but we'll find out after the show. One of the things we talked about yesterday is the fact that I'm very excited to have Patrick Wardle. Patrick Wardle, who used to work for the NSA, who now runs his own really wonderful set of resources for the security community, for the Mac community called Objective C. And I don't remember that off the top of my head. I believe it's Objective SEE, objectivec.com, I believe. Anyway, Patrick Wardle, great guy. He actually found one of the bits of malware last week for the M1 Mac, the first one for the M1 Mac. And he's also commented on the second bit of malware found for the M1 Mac. So we talked to him on tomorrow's edition of the Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac, about both of those pieces of malware. And then, sort of the malware landscape ahead, let's say, for the M1, and some stuff that he's up to as well. So the show you're looking for is called The Checklist. It is brought to you by Secure Mac. Patrick Wardle on tomorrow. That's episode 220. So you got that episode, and then you have 219 other episodes of security news and how-tos and just some really fun stuff as well. And I know I said security news and how-tos and fun stuff. There are at least 2 episodes dedicated to movies. Those are fun episodes, so you want to check them out. securemac.com/checklist is a place to do that, or look for The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac, wherever you get podcasts. I want to go back to a quote by Harsh Kumar really quickly. And yes, we're shifting. We're shifting lanes. We're changing. We're not talking about the car anymore, but there was a quote by Harsh Kumar that I was thinking about when I was thinking about the television stuff that I also want to talk about really quickly today. Harsh Kumar said, "We do not see an Apple car being a meaningful contributor in its early years, but over the long term, we feel it can provide the next leg of growth for Apple's hardware business." TV is not going to provide the next leg of growth for Apple's hardware business, but here is a question. Why is it when people look at the possibility of Apple getting into a car, they say, well, it's not going to do anything anytime soon, but eventually? Or they say, we don't know whether this is going to be a car that people are going to be able to buy, a fleet that Apple's going to own. It might be an operating system that Apple sells to other people. We don't know, but we know we're excited about Apple getting into this, right? We don't know what's going to happen with the car, but we're excited. But when most analysts talk about Apple TV Plus, it's a failure. They screwed up. Is it because we all have cameras on our phones now? Do we think, is the fact that I can sit down here and look at a camera that I can't even see because it's like, flush with my computer and put my video out to like 30 or 40 people at a time, 30,000 or 40,000 if I ever got big, 300,000 or 400,000, in my dreams? Is it the fact that we can all produce video that makes us think that we can say what the deal is with video? Is it the fact that we grew up watching television that makes us think we have some idea of what Apple is doing in television and how they really should do it and how they screwed up? Daniel Ives is the most bullish person in the financial sector on Apple, at least as far as, analysts that we keep an eye on. He's got an outperform rating on Apple shares and a price target of $175. Philip Elmer DeWitt says that he is allergic to having his price target matched by anybody else. If somebody comes out tomorrow and makes their price target 175, by the end of the week, Daniel Ives will be at 180 or 185 even. And I think that's kind of a joke, but he seriously has been out front of everybody for the past couple of years on Apple's price target. And yet, in a piece with Yahoo Finance, he said the biggest strategic mistake, in my opinion, from Jobs and Cook over the last 10 to 12 years is not acquiring Netflix a number of years ago. Because apparently what Apple is doing is screwing up. And I don't understand how we can look at things like wearables, which we don't understand, and know we don't understand, and say it's going to be interesting to see what Apple does here. And we can look at things like the car, which we don't understand. We know how to drive a car, but we wouldn't know how to design a car. We wouldn't know how to build one. how we can look at that and say, well, it's going to be interesting to see what Apple can do there. And there's a lot of money that could be made there. And then we look at TV like we're looking at TV, like we're watching our stories and saying, well, they're totally screwing this up. That's really all I got there. I don't understand that. It's it's an investment in the future. And it's never going to be the iPhone, and it's never gonna be Apple Watch, and it's probably never even gonna be AirPods. Talking it over with Tom Merritt on In a Few Minutes last week, he thinks all TV is another thing for Apple One. Apple One is, of course, Apple's, premium services bundle thing, right? I was already paying as much as the premium thing was gonna cost. Apple One Premium or Apple One Premier, whatever the highest tier is, I was already paying that much for 3 services, and so I flipped it over to Apple, the highest level thing, because now they've thrown in Apple Arcade, about which I do not care, and they've thrown in Apple TV Plus, or they will once they start charging for it, and I personally do care about that, but Tom's feeling on the whole thing is that all Apple TV Plus really is another thing to get people to subscribe to the premium service, which you got to figure then means that they're operating at such a margin that they can go ahead and blow however many hundreds of millions of dollars a year making video content just to get me to sign up for storage that I'm never going to use. Because I use the storage, but I don't use nearly as much as I'm paying for, maybe. I don't, it's an interesting idea. I'm not 100% certain I agree with that, but you can make that argument. I personally see tons of reasons not to buy Netflix. Now, would I like them to have all of the Netflix content for the same price? Sure, I guess. But one of the most frustrating things about Netflix is, oh, I'm going to go watch, whatever movie. Oh, it left yesterday or the day before because of a contractual agreement that they had. And suddenly it's not available to me now, or I'm going to chase it onto another service or something along those lines. The stuff on Apple TV Plus is the stuff that's going to be on Apple TV Plus because they own it. They don't have to chase $100 million or $1 billion or whatever it was deal to get Friends for 7 years, right? They don't have to make some, keep getting in bed with somebody to make a deal for another 2 years to hold on to content that people may or may not watch. They don't have to chase the same kind of deals that they have to chase with the record labels every few years. They don't have to chase the same kind of deals that Netflix was in a fight for to try to get Friends before it went to HBO Max, I think, Peacock. I don't even remember where it ended up. Now, I mean, for some people, that might be the most important thing in the world, but they're making so much content. They're making so much content. 5 years from now, and I know that's crazy because Netflix today and look at all that money that's going to Netflix that could be going to Apple as if Apple is hurting. But 5 years from now, who knows what the landscape is going to look like? And Apple TV Plus will probably still not be Netflix, and it will probably still not beat Netflix, but it won't be what it was a year ago, and it won't be what it is today. There was one other thing that I found interesting that, by the way, that Daniel Ives thing is not going to be on Mac OS Ken. It's interesting to me as far as conversation is concerned, but it's not news. It's not the first time he said it. He's not the first person to say it. Even if it was a mistake not to buy it 10 or 12 years ago, it was 10 or 12 years ago. If I'd been in the room, it's possible that Daniel Ives sat there and said, no, they haven't made any mistakes at all. Are you sure? No, they haven't made any mistakes. Oh, come on. You got to think of one thing. Well, maybe they should have bought Netflix 10 or 12 years ago. I mean, it could just be as simple as that. And now a whole article is written. I don't think Daniel Ives is walking around saying, oh, they could have been a company. They could have been a good company, if only. Here was the story that I found interesting. And it's weird to think about the different ways that the different parts of Apple might work, right? There was a really far too long for me to read article in Deadline from the people who did Wolfwalkers, which if you haven't seen it, it's really good. The animation is beautiful. The story, I mean, it's a kid's movie, so it's not going to take you long to figure out how the story is going to go. And yet, if you have interest or patience, it's a beautiful movie. I mean, visually, it's a beautiful movie, and yeah, it's worth a watch if you're interested. So the directors of that were talking to Deadline, and they talked about a whole bunch of stuff, far too much stuff for me to read. But they did say we have a big series for Apple TV that's not really announced, but it's epic because it's feature quality, hand drawn animation across 12 hours, and then a big hour-long special at the end, which is going to take a lot of work. If this was the car, they just lost that deal. But Hollywood is not hardware. Hollywood is built on buzz, right? Like, I kind of wonder if there's somebody in Cupertino going, right, get them on the phone because we're done with their deal. And then Zach Van Amberg and the other one, who is not Zach Van Amberg, have to say, no, 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 what they did is great because now there's buzz. Who knows? Kind of excited about the possibility of a hand-drawn animated series. It sounds like it'll only take about 9 years to make. But by then, we're 4 years past when I said come back in 5 years. Time flies, huh? Hey, I think that's going to do it for us this afternoon. If you're here in the chat room, please stay in the chat room. I will be by in just a moment. If you're not here in the chat room, a good group of people gets together every day there and chats it up. And then I come in and wreck the whole thing. But they keep letting me, so I show up. If, by the way, you're catching this on YouTube and want to be able to hear this stuff other places, other times, there's an audio podcast available. That audio podcast, funny enough, is called Mac OS Can Live. Find that wherever you find podcasts. Got that great interview with Patrick Wardle coming up on the checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac tomorrow morning. Mac OS Ken goes again tomorrow morning. Mac OS Ken Live goes tomorrow afternoon. And I'll talk to you soon. I forgot to talk about one part. It always happens the second I hit stop. So I've seen a Fisker car up close and in person. Never been in one, but there's one. There's a shopping center near me. Back when I used to go shopping just for fun, as opposed to mask up, get in, get out, nobody gets hurt. I didn't do a lot of shopping for fun, but there was whatever. There was a cute little place that sold stationery. A Japanese place called Daiso. And there are a couple of charging stations right at that place. And almost every time I went there, there was a Fisker plugged into the charging station. It's also where the grocery store was, or, well, the grocery store I used to go to is. So I was there, a decent amount, at least once a week. And did not realize that Fisker was actually one of the 3 companies I was telling you about is in this town in Orange County. I'm not going to tell you which town because I don't want you to make fun of me, nor do I want you stalking me. But yeah, they're apparently just down the road. And yet I've only seen the one repeatedly. Beautiful cars, though. Right, let's go back up and see who's saying what. Okay, well, as the show started, Matthew was still talking about smoking jackets. With the sash and like the brocade kind of feel like that. Bill says, at what point do we drop the term television, or does it hang around like dialing a phone? How about YouTube? What's a tube? Right? And you still hit play on, you still tape things. I'm getting better about recording things, not taping things, but you still tape things. I thought Fisker made scissors. Different Fisker. That's Fiskar. Or is it Fisker? No, I can't remember. Matthew says, didn't Fisker go bankrupt on the last car they did? Maybe. How does a guy get to keep doing that, right? My assumption is his design is incredible. I'm honestly kind of excited about the possibility of the Foxconn thing because his cars are beautiful and I would like to see more of them on the road. I mean, it's never going to be like a Yugo or a Hyundai or a Kia or anything like that, a Toyota. Should I keep naming car brands or are we good? It's a breakthrough electric car, a Foxconn product, an urban mobility device. Are you getting it? Nicola, says Gary. All right. Oh, whirling thing, video stuff, reload fixed. Okay, yeah, that was the problem I was having too. I may have had something open here. I don't know if you saw me closing stuff while we were going. I apologize. Oh, there's still one more thing open that shouldn't have been. Yay. Matthew asks if Lotus made the body for Fisker's last car. I don't know. I mentioned Laura Burstein having been on Inside Mac. She stayed in automotive. I'm actually thinking about maybe doing one episode because I don't think she does enough of the tech stuff anymore to do a whole week, but I could do one episode, maybe two within a few minutes with her talking about that. I'm also curious about her ideas about the whole EV space, but she tends to be more of a V8 gal. I'm sure she knows about it. Anyway, whatever. I'm thinking about it, thinking about doing that. Interesting. Webb says Magna makes the Mercedes G-Wagon and some versions of the BMW 5 Series. That's interesting. It also surprises me. No middle name for Tesla. Well, then we should just come up with something like future sounding and say, we'll start a car company. We'll start an electric car company and say, no, that was Nikola Tesla's middle name. Eddie. Nikola Eddie Tesla. Tesla. Not Tesla. It's my Boston coming out. Take the R's from where they belong, put them places they don't belong. Drawing, for example. Getting your car. What kind of car is it? It's a Tesla. Fixed on 66 says BMW is too much of an iconic name. They won't let Apple have their label on it. See, several years ago, if we weren't talking about Apple making their own car, if we weren't talking about autonomous vehicles, like I could have seen an Apple edition of somebody or a BMW edition of an Apple something. But yeah, it's hard for me to see them marrying to anyone else on that. They'd rather pretend they did it themselves, kind of like Apple makes iPad. Apple doesn't make iPad. They don't know how to make an iPad. Foxconn makes iPad and Pegatron and Wistron, right? But it's Apple. It's Apple's iPad. I know Webb is a believer in BMW and Apple getting together on this. And, sure, it could absolutely happen because right now the whole thing's made up. Bring back the Pontiac. See, Apple Car by Pontiac. Matthew, I did not see you say that before I said it. What's weird is if you had asked me if I cared about any car when I was a kid, the answer is no. I miss the Pontiac. I don't know why. I mean, my first real car was a Pontiac Sunbird, and I can't remember what kind of car we had when I was growing up. I want to say Le Mans, but I don't know that that's actually a Pontiac. I did something about that car I miss. And no, Apple's not going to bring back the Pontiac as much as I wish they would. I did not know that BMW made the Mini. Web. That's interesting. I like the Mini, but they're very much a Mini. You know, I had a friend who had one in San Francisco, and I really enjoyed riding around in it. I even got to drive it one time, and it's nice, but it's always I don't know how to explain that exactly, but I was thinking about that too, about like the VW Bug that came out in the 90s, and there's one other car that every time I see it, I'm like, "Well, it's nice," but I mean, you're always gonna feel like you're in that car, you know what I mean? I don't think driving a Mini, unless it's one of the great big ones, it just makes no sense. I don't think driving a Mini ever feels like anything but driving a Mini, and I can't put that into the words I want to, but I'll try. Like, I got to drive a Miata a few years ago, and I love, like, little, like, I've driven a few of them, and I feel like I'm on the road. I don't feel like I'm driving a Miata. My last car was, like, a 1990 something Toyota something. I can't even remember, which is terrible. But a great big sort of, like, land barge, four-door sedan. Um, and I was not really, I mean, conscious of the fact that I'm going down the road, but it wasn't like I'm driving this kind of car. It's sort of like, you could lose yourself in driving. A Mini always feels like you're in a Mini to me somehow. That is my lack of poetry for the day. You know, Bill, I actually thought about asking Patrick if he would like to do that show. Not Wheel of Stuff, but ask him if he wants to do it in a few minutes. But I think probably not. What is a big melt? What did I miss? Because now I also want a big melt for dinner, and I don't even think they exist. Unless they're from Hardee's. No, I like Hardee's, actually. I'm not gonna make fun. Okay, now you guys are just making up a sandwich, which is kind of annoying me because 'cause I'm hungry. Look at Chuck Joyner. Look at Chuck Joyner. He's up there trying to talk about Apple TV Plus, and everybody else is talking about the big melt. I'm with you, Chuck. I almost didn't wanna bring it up again, except it's, always an interesting thing to talk about. I saw it and was talking, to my special lady friend about why it's a stupid story, and once I'd been talking about it for 5 minutes without even thinking, I thought, "Okay, yeah, I'll talk about that on the show," because it's just dumb. It's not even a story. Ha. Eugene says Apple should buy Paramount. Apple can't buy Paramount anymore. Paramount today, I don't know if their call is over or not, but Paramount today is announcing their gigantic play with CBS and CBS All Access and all that stuff. They could buy MGM. I mean, they might be able to afford. Why is it getting laggy again? There's nothing else open on my machine. They could afford to buy Paramount, but I think Paramount, excuse me, has a lot now invested in being its own thing, but they always have, haven't they? Do do do. Yeah, Brian says I've talked about that before too. Apple doesn't need all the back catalog because it isn't solely TV. It's only a very small part of the company. Yeah. Eugene says Apple would make Star Trek well. Yeah. Seth MacFarlane is making Star Trek just fine. Yes, I'm talking about the Orville. Donna says she thinks she's been living under a rock because she's never heard of the Fisker car until today. If not for my friend on that show, I don't think I would have heard of them either. I would have seen one at that store, but yeah, I don't think so. Last time I can think of that is the Eddie Bauer edition of a Ford F-150. Yeah, I feel like there's another one. Isn't there a Jeep? I feel like there's a Jeep that is somebody else's edition of something. Might have Le Mans or Grand Prix. Both of those sound familiar, Matthew. It might have been the Le Mans that we had, or it might have been the Grand Prix. I don't know. John McKee asking if there will ever be more episodes of the Orville. Yeah, there's somebody I follow. I can't remember who, but who's on the production, and he keeps sharing pictures from the set, not of any of the actors, but of some of the props and background stuff. So yes, is the answer to your question. They're in production right now. I'm very excited about that. Cool. You're welcome, Dow. Did you catch that on? Curious where you caught that. I think we talked about it on both in a few minutes and the checklist. I don't remember if I did that on macOS 10 or not. Talking about the fact that some podcast hosts actually track their listeners. Boo, I say. Yeah, Dow thinks it was on the checklist. Cool. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right, by the way. All right. Did they use biofilters to cover COVID? Conquer COVID, I mean. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, good. Glad to hear that, Dow. Right. I'm going to go restart my computer because everything's being all jittery and weird. Then I'm going to turn this into an audio show, and then I have to put together shows for tomorrow. So I'm going to go. This was fun. Thank you guys for sticking around and for chatting it up. And yeah, you're rock stars. I appreciate it. We'll do this again tomorrow afternoon. We'll probably talk about other stuff though. So, get ready. Take care.